the beginning, there was acid, then it became techno.
Hey guys, Dilby here, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got an awesome video for you, an epic video for you. We're looking at progressive techno in the style of like Space Motion, Artbat, stuff on like Diynamic, Still for Talent, that kind of thing. This is not really something I produce regularly. I guess I kind of dabble into things maybe a bit more progressive, but it is super fun to make, and my god, it can destroy a club. So what I'm going to do today is walk through some of the sound design and how you kind of get that intense, aggressive nature in the tracks. As always, there's a download link for the project in the description of this video. It goes to my Patreon, which is one of the best ways that you can support me and support the channel. The project has all of the MIDI presets, all the sounds that I've used in the tutorial, so you can kind of grab that and follow along with the video, and you can kind of dive in and see a bit more detail about how I've created all those sounds. On top of that, through Patreon, you have access to all of the other projects from all of the other videos on the channel, and you also have the opportunity to submit tracks for the live streams when I give track feedback. So maybe it's something that you want to look into. At least jump over there and have a look. All right, that's enough of that. Let's make some techno. Alright guys, so here we are inside Ableton, and this is the project that I've put together for this kind of progressive techno in the style of Space Motion and other artists that I mentioned. So let's have a listen through. I'm not really a techno producer, so don't roast me too hard if this is like terrible. I think it's okay. Let's go.
In the beginning, there was acid, then it became techno.
Let me know in the comments if that was an epic fail, but let's get into it. All right, so let's start off with the kick. We've got one kick here. It's basically like a big, huge, subby kick with a really, really prominent click on the top. That really cuts through the mix. I'm not doing too much to it. I found one that fit in the key of the track. It says F on it, but I actually figured it was at F sharp, and the key of the track is D sharp, so that means that it's 3 semitones above, so it's in the scale of D sharp. Now I've got a clap. So the clap is like big, distorted, quite long. It's got a bit of reverb on it, just my standard clap plate. And it's got a bit more reverb than I would normally put on it. The sample is a bit longer than I would normally use. It's very, very distorted, and it kind of really fills that space with the kick. I've got the snare here, which is kind of grooving along with that main clap. Cool. That just helps it just adds interest every bar and kind of keeps it rolling along, keeps the beat really intense. So we've got some hats, got quite a few actually. So a big open hat, kind of 909 style. I'm just cutting out the low frequencies. That snare's probably a bit loud, I might just turn it down a little bit. Now we've got this closed hat also, which is, let's see the MIDI. So it's kind of doing this rolling pattern where we've got like a quieter one, an even quieter one, a bigger one in the main like offbeat position, then another quiet one, and that's kind of rolling along. And we've got a vocoder on it. So this is adding like a white noise on top, and then I'm cutting out some of the low frequencies. I find it easier to do it with the EQ than with the EQ on the vocoder. It's just a bit more visual. So let's have a listen to that. So as you can see, I'm automating this release so that it kind of works to create like an effects type sound, like a white noise riser. Really cool. Now I've got a shaker, which has got a similar pattern to the closed hi-hat, even more extreme with these kind of groove ones being a bit more quiet. So let's have a listen. And that's like quite a different shaker sound than I would normally use in my own productions, but it really kind of adds to the techno nature. So this is with the closed hat. And then the shaker. So this is really doubling with the closed hat. It's just filling out some more frequencies in the highs and giving quite a lot of energy in the drums. Then we've got these groove hats, which is a closed hat, an open hat, and a shaker. And they are literally playing over 2 bars, and it's just relatively kind of random. You can see that they're mainly on the 16ths, and it's just really adding groove to the drums because the drums are quite straight. Let's take off these 16th ones, and then we can listen. So you can see they're making the drums quite a lot more interesting, giving it some like groove and life and some variation. Now I've found this conga loop. I noticed in a lot of Space Motion's tracks in particular, he always had some kind of organic sounding percussion in the low mids. And he makes like, as well as progressive techno kind of style, he also makes like Afro house kind of stuff, pretty epic Afro house. And I think these kind of drums are a kind of crossover from the other style that he does, but they work quite well on the track. Cool, so that's the drums. Now let's have a look at the bass line. So this is the MIDI for the bass. So it's basically like a 16th note. It's actually very similar to the closed hats and shakers, but I've just taken off the bass note on the downbeat to make room for the kick. So if I play that together with the kick, so you can see that that's really grooving well together. I do have a sidechain on it still, but there's more to help it roll with this note on the second 16th and kind of just create some groove. So the bass is playing a chord progression, well, where it would be the base of the chord progression. It's playing D sharp, which is the root note, then down to A sharp, which is the 5th, and then we've got the C sharp as well. And this chord progression is used in some other elements like this Reese Bass and a pad. So let's dive into the synthesis. I've got a wave table, and I'll just expand this up. You can see here that I've transposed the whole synth down by 12, which just means that I don't need to play MIDI so low. So starting off, we've got a sub oscillator, which has got quite a lot of tone. So if I turn off the other 2 oscillators, and let's turn off all the effects. I'll leave the sidechain on. So if I just play the sub, and And then if I take off the filter, so you can see that that tone is adding quite a lot of rich harmonics to that sub. So I'll add the filter back on. So that alone is quite a cool sound. Then we've got oscillator 1, which is a sawtooth. Then the amp envelope is like this, which is really shaping the sound to be very plucky. We don't have a lot of sustain, which we don't need it because it's playing on 16th notes, so we want the notes to be really short. If this had a lot of sustain, the notes would be kind of rolling into each other, and then you get this problem which occurs where, say in a club with big subwoofers, to form those frequencies, the sub has to like expand and then contract, and it never gets a chance to contract if there's constant sub frequency there. So you really want to have some dynamics in your low end, which is going to allow the subwoofers to expand and contract fully, which is going to make your bass, your sub, much more punchy in the club. Pro tip. So then we're using envelope 3, which is here, very similar envelope to the amp, to modulate the filter cutoff. The filter cutoff is really, really tight. So if I take away this envelope modulation, you can see it's almost letting through no signal. So I put that back. We get this really like plucky, nice pulsing sound. We've got no resonance, but a bit of drive, and it's set to the most aggressive setting. So that's the wavetable. Then we're using some overdrive to add some more upper harmonics and give it this like really gritty, aggressive sound. Now I want the bass to be really big, as they generally are in these kind of tracks. It's also worth noting I'm sending it to a bit of reverb, which is just my standard reverb from my template. This is how that looks. This is just the standard reverb that I use on every track. Video link up here for that template walkthrough of it. So I've got this audio effects track, which I'll turn it on. I've got the dry signal coming through, so that sounds like it did before. Then I've got a chorus, and I'm just pumping up some of the upper mids. I've got this Freetel Chorus LX, great plugin for free. I've got that set to fully wet because we've got the dry signal, so I'm just adding the chorus on top. And then of course I'm cutting off the subs because I don't want the chorus to be affecting the subs. So this is how the chorus sounds. So it makes it really nice, big, spacious, wide, but obviously we're cutting the subs, so the subs are still intact and they're going to be punchy. Then I've got this delay with a short feedback. I'm using a little bit of the filter to cut out some of the highest frequencies. It's also set to 100% wet. This is a stereo delay with a 16th note and a dotted 8th note. So this is really adding some kind of interesting character to the sound. So with the delay in the chorus, we really get like a big, full, impactful sound. So in the break, I've got this Reese Bass. Following the same chord progression as the other bass line. The Reese is basically just a sine wave, and I've added 5 voices of unison, 100% unison. So if I turn off the unison, super boring, but the unison gives it that big, phasey, wide, aggressive sound. I've got a 24 dB filter, which is cutting out a lot of the upper harmonics, a bit of resonance and a bit of drive, and then like a little bit of envelope modulation on that filter. So we're getting a little pluck at the start. Here's how the envelope looks, and here's the amp envelope. I think I've just used the default ones from the wavetable. So here's that sound without the filter. And in context, and in context. So that really provides a kind of drama in the break. Because it's doing the chord progression, it gives it a bit of emotion as well. Having that big sudden change in the arrangement really makes an impact in the break. But because the Reese Bass is so powerful and subby, it's kind of maintain energy through that break as well and really kind of add intensity to the track. Okay, so now let's look at the melodic elements. First of all, I've got this melody. I'm using AAAA 2 here, so I will freeze this. Basically, it's a pretty simple sound. It's just a preset that I found on here. It's got a oscillator 1, which is a sawtooth, oscillator 2, which is a sawtooth, and then oscillator 3, which is also a sawtooth. And these have all got like a couple of voices. It's got 2, 2, 2. Those are detuned. So it's basically what you'd call a super saw, used in trance a lot. Then that's being filtered and modulated with a filter envelope. So it's actually a really simple sound. You could make this in any synth. Basically, I just got this by preset flicking and found a sound that was close to what I was looking for. And this is actually something that I do a lot. So don't be scared to do it yourself. But it's always nice to have a look at the synth and understand how it was made. So added to this sound, I've got some overdrive, some chorus, and some delay. I'll take those off and we can listen to the sound. I've also got this EQ, which is like pulling out a bit of frequency in the upper mids and boosting a little bit in the highs just to help it cut through. So let's have a listen to the sound. Oops, I forgot that I was affecting quite a lot of stuff on this group. So let me just group this. Turn it off. So here's the raw sound. So here's the MIDI for that. Together with the other elements. So it's really working with the pace of the other elements and helping to kind of give some intensity. It's rhythmically intense, but it's also got like a kind of interesting melody to it, even though it's repetitive, which helps with the kind of hypnotic nature of the track. So in the melody, we're just playing like the root note, then we're going up to the F sharp and down to the F. That provides like a nice melodic groove. It happens quickly, but it's got a little bit of tension and release every time that D sharp comes along again. So you get some tension here, and then it increases the tension, and then it resolves again. So now with the processing, I've got some overdrive, really making that fizzy and distorted. You'll notice that's a theme in this track. Chorus, big and wide. Delay, got a lot of wet on the delay. Again, just trying to make the sound bigger, then the EQ, boosting it to cut through. And then I've got some effects on this group, which I'm going to talk about next, I guess. But first of all, I'll talk about the layer. So this is just a wavetable preset from Live. And this is basically just additional higher harmonic sound to help it cut through. Really electronic sounding, kind of gives it this really electronic vibe. Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound like a real instrument at all, by any means. So if I play the main one, so you can hear that how that sits on top and really helps it to cut through. Let me turn these off. So I've got some reverb. Making the sound just extra big and epic. And then after the reverb, I've got some saturation. So what I'm doing here is adding drive and then taking away the gain. So it's adding crunch and harmonics, but it's not adding additional volume. Although it sounds much louder. Then I'm adding some erosion, and this is like using the sine, and that's kind of adding a bit crushed quality to it. So this is kind of like distortion on distortion on distortion, and that just helps to really thicken up the sound and give it this kind of aggressive, gritty nature. Then I'm using this glue compressor to glue these two sounds together, but also to control the dynamics. Then I've got an auto filter, which I'm using to manipulate the sound and kind of bring it in and bring it out. So that auto filter really helps to kind of create tension and release in the track. Next in the break, we've got these big stabs. Don't know if it gets much bigger than that. So they've got like a real brassy kind of quality to them. For this sound, again, I'm using a lot of distortion and saturation in the effects. Let me just turn some of this off. Here's what the sound is like without it. I'm also adding a little bit of delay and reverb here from my template, which you can hear. So for the sound here, we've got some sub, but I've turned it fully down. So let's just turn it off. And I've got oscillator 1, saw, oscillator 2, a saw, which is tuned down an octave. Then we've got a filter. This time I'm using a 12 dB filter with a very aggressive drive, and I'm not cutting it down too far. It's basically there so I can modulate the cutoff to shape the sound using envelope 2. So there's 67% on the envelope and the amplification envelope. So it has this kind of gradual attack in, same as the filter envelope. And that's what's giving it this brassy kind of quality. Then I've got it set to mono. I've also got a bit of glide, and I've got a lot of unison. So that's giving it this big wide sound. Now on the effects, I've got this utility, which is pulling back some of that stereo information that's being added by the unison. So here's the utility. So that just gives it, that kind of controls the stereo image a bit. Then the pedal, I've got this set to fuzz, basically just giving another flavor of distortion. There's so much distortion and saturation in this track that I think you want to find different sources to give different textures to the different sounds. So that fuzz, it's set to 100% wet. It's super aggressive. It really helps it to cut through and sound like really dirty in the mix. Some more saturation, this time set to a soft sine. So just adding more saturation. Another saturation set to a hard curve. Again, making it more and more gritty. But by this one, I'm not using the full dry wet. I'm just blending it in. Then I've got an echo, which I've got set to 16th notes, and I've just slightly offset the left and right signals. This is only being used by 27% and 25% dry wet, and this is more to give it like a character than a delay. Helps to fill in some of those gaps between the stabs. Then I've got the OTT from Live, which is really pushing the mid-range and helps to accentuate that distorted, saturated character. It's also controlling the lows and the highs a bit. I've got some reverb to make it big again, quite a long reverb, but I've got it 20% wet. Then I've got a limiter, which I'm using to control the dynamics, make it sound even louder without the additional volume. So I mean, that sound is just out of control. It's so big, isn't it? Then as I said, I've got it being sent to quite a bit of reverb and delay. Here's the MIDI. So the MIDI is playing like the D sharp, then we're going up, and it's kind of, so it's playing lower, higher, and slowly kind of descending down the scale. Having those jumps in pitch while maintaining like this downward theme helps to give it this like really epic end of the world type vibe. Really nasty, gritty stuff. Next up, we've got a very iconic sound, Growl, instantly recognizable from this style. So as you can see here, I was experimenting with having more than one note of the chord progression, but I just went with the D sharp. So it's like a synth stab that's happening at some key moments. It's almost like a transition effect kind of element. It's doing the same thing as like a crash. In the synthesis, it's a preset from Ableton, Dual OS1 detune lead. So it's just a detuned saw lead. So we've got two sawtooths playing over 2 octaves, and then this one is detuned a bit, which helps it to kind of gives it this gritty, aggressive nature. Then they're each being sent through their own 12 dB filter, which is again just kind of shaping the sound. Amp has a bit of release, which is helping to extend the sound out. And then we've got a bit of unison detune here. So without the effects, still a cool sound, but not as kind of epic. So on the effects front, we've got some overdrive. Really gritting it up, giving it that buzzy kind of quality. Erosion with some sine, so it's adding like a bit crushing quality, so it's going to help it sound kind of more buzzy in the top end. Then the reverb, which is really important. I've got that set to 40% dry wet. It's like an almost 9-second decay time. And this is really kind of what's making it that kind of washy, big, epic sound. Then I've got some chorus to make it wider again. It also helps to accentuate that kind of phasey quality. Now on the EQ, I've got it set to mid-side mode. On the mid, I'm just cutting out some of the subs. And on the side, I'm pushing up some of the highs while cutting out all of the subs, so that all of this kind of stereo information that's being added by these effects, the unison and the chorus, is being cut away in the subs. It's very similar to how I was using the utility before, just a different way of doing the same thing. Then I'm sidechaining it to give it that kind of pumping vibe, then adding even more reverb to increase that kind of washy vibe. Such an epic element, and it's got a lot of application for other genres too. You could use it in like Afro house, melodic house, tech house, lots of stuff. Then I've got a pad for this. I've just used a pad preset from Wavetable, and I'm using the chord device to make it into a minor triad. Then I'm using the scale device set to D sharp, which is the key of our track, which is just going to push any of these notes that are created by this chord device into the scale. Now this is important because I'm using the same progression as before, and I know that this C sharp, it should be a major, but it's going to be a minor. So it's essentially just a lazy way of doing it. So even more overdrive. And some chorus. The chorus actually helps to mellow it out a bit in the high end, which is nice. Cutting away the subs because this is playing together with this Reese Bass, and this is basically to mirror this harmonic energy but add a bit more emotion. So it's just helping to add some really nice tension in the break there. Now I've got this vocal, something I found, like I wouldn't say that, say, Space Motion in particular has a specific style of vocals that he uses. It could be anything really. Obviously in the Afro house stuff, it's more Afro kind of vocals. This is just what I found. Maybe it's a bit cheesy, but it was more about showing you how to get the kind of the sound that I've got with it. So I'll just take off the effects.
In the beginning, there was acid, then it became techno.
So you can hear that's already got some effects on it. It's got a bit of reverb on it, and I'm just using this gate to cut that away a bit. Then I'm using this glue compressor to control the dynamics and cutting away any of the sub-frequencies that are being added or accentuated by the compression. Then in the processing, I've got an OTT, which is really kind of pumping it up and pushing it into your face.
In the beginning, there was acid, then it...
So this is the reason that I've got the gate at the start. So if I take the gate off, you can hear that the OTT is pushing up a lot of the atmospheric sound from the original sample.
In the beginning, there was acid.
And it kind of sounds a bit awful. So I just use the gate to take some of that away.
In the beginning, there was acid.
Still sounds a bit awful. Then I've added some chorus to spread it out, make it seem even bigger.
In the beginning.
Then some echo, which is set to an 8th note ping pong, and it's kind of adding atmosphere, basically, making it seem big. I've got it also sent to some reverb from my template.
In the beginning, there was acid.
And then I'm automating the send just to create a delay on this techno bit.
Then it became techno.
And I've edited the clip volume envelope so that it only plays one time, and I've just pulled down the gain on this techno bit as it really stuck out. You can see that just from the waveform, it's quite a bit louder than the rest of the sample, so I just wanted that to be a bit more controlled. Now, moving on to the effects, I've got this snare fill, which is just kind of adding a bit of a turnaround at the end of 8 bars. It kind of signals that something's going to happen, like this growl, or the drop, or the break. I've got a reverse crash, which I've just pitched down a bit, so it's not so high frequency, and then I've got it sent to a lot of delay. This is the delay that I'm using, just a basic quarter note from Ableton, ping pong. So that delay helps it to kind of extend on a bit more and be a lot more atmospheric and kind of epic in the track. I've got a white noise crash here. This one's from my sample pack. Link to buy it up there if you want to support. And this is like a big reverbed clap. And then I've got that being sent to even more reverb. This is a big reverb fill that I use for effects. Then I've got a snare riser. You can see the MIDI here. So it's just kind of playing this pattern and then going to all straight 16ths. And then we have the big clap, which creates some kind of impact and anticipation before the reverse. So this is how the tension in the break is created. And I should be automating this to send to this big washy reverb. Something like that. So let's talk a little bit about the arrangement. So everything here is done to create kind of drama and impact. Everything's quite strong and intense and really kind of make an impact when they happen. Then we create tension through the break. I've kind of condensed this. It probably should be twice as long to fit in like the vocal and the stabs, so it sounds a bit rushed. What I would probably do is have each section of this twice as long to create a lot more anticipation and create a lot more tension, which therefore creates release when it drops again. So what's happening here is like we build up and then the drop comes without the clap and most of the hats, and that just really creates this like heads down moment in the club where it's like back to business. Then we use the white noise on the hat to build up some kind of tension here before dropping back to the groove. I've also got the melody filtered down here, so it's kind of reintroducing that melody, but it's filtered out, and then when this tension kind of peaks, it opens the filter and drops back in with the full groove, which creates like this really cool effect, I think. So there, that's how we make some spacey progressive techno. So as always, if you want to grab the project, there's a link in the description. It goes to my Patreon. Great way to support me and support the channel, all that kind of stuff. There's loads of other templates and things on there, so go and take a look. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you had some fun. I sure did making it. As you can probably see, saturation is the name of the game here. Overdrive, distortion, all the different flavors. It's actually really interesting to see how you can kind of use those different styles of distortion and saturation on top of one another to create new harmonic kind of textures and tones in the sound. But really what I learned here is that's the key to this sound. Distortion, saturation, overdrive, compression, big, 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 big. If you like this video, then there's a good chance you're going to like this one, where I break down some of Hot Since 82's biggest bass lines. So go check that out. Alright, that's it from me today. I'll catch you next time. Peace!